Welcome back. It's time now for a check of the top business news stories. For that, I'm joined by Owen Fairclough from the Business Desk.
Good morning, Tom.
Hello, Owen. Now, this week has been rather a busy one for Europe, and there's non-stop talk of recession, growth pacts, a government down by austerity. Loads of earnings figures to pick through as well. How are the markets digesting all of that?
Well, marginally up, Tom. There's so much going on. I'm not sure that many investors know quite which way to look right now, as you say, with all of this going on in the Eurozone. And we've got some big company earnings reports as well. Those are the markets at the opening bell in Europe. You can see there just the FTSE managing to find some gains. The rest of the European markets pretty flat. We've got French unemployment figures coming out towards the end of the day. What a time for unemployment figures to be combed over with, of course, President Sarkozy and François Hollande trying their best to find some sort of meaningful economic policy. Let's take a look at the Asian markets as well. The Nikkei finishing the day pretty flat too, but managing to find some gains. The rest of the markets there not too far behind. Tom, you mentioned earnings. There are loads of them out there this morning, too many for us to pick through, but I've taken one or two of them there. You can see AstraZeneca at the top there. Profits for the first quarter down 44%, and AstraZeneca's CEO David Brennan taking the hit for that by resigning. The only company that's really finding some good gains there is Boeing. You can see profits up for the first quarter around 60%. Good first quarter for them. And at the bottom there, Santander, their profits down by nearly 25%, writing off around €3 billion as they try to unwind from that very costly housing bubble burst in Spain, which is partly responsible, well, very much responsible for taking that economy back into recession.
Seriously impressive results from Boeing there, really ready for takeoff. Well, we're going to stay with Europe because the old continent now finds itself at an important crossroads. The UK's fall back into recession has thrown into question the policy of printing cash to stimulate growth. Well, the European Central Bank is banned from doing that, preferring to back a French-led demand for a coordinated growth strategy. But will even that work where plans for austerity have failed? Here's Caterina Vitozzi.
Depending on where you live in the EU, your government will have its own approach to tackling its debt crisis. In the UK, the Bank of England stood by its policy of quantitative easing, pumping £325 billion into the economy via asset purchases, mainly of government bonds. It's also kept interest rates at a record low of 0.5%. And yet neither policy has helped stimulate private sector growth. The UK economy shrunk in the first quarter of 2012. But it's not alone. Spain is also in a double-dip recession, its GDP contracting 0.4% so far this year. That's despite €1 trillion worth of cheap loans provided by the ECB in an attempt to inject cash into Spanish banks. The ECB's been against quantitative easing amid fears of inflation. But with both UK and Spanish economies clearly unresponsive to both types of stimulus, the ECB recognises that for them, they need a change of tack.
Most present in my mind now is to have a growth compact. I think that's what we have to have it.
A growth compact that would add to the budgetary one already signed by 25 EU states. Great idea, says French presidential hopeful François Hollande. I've had the same one.
The fiscal pact should be combined with a growth pact. If I am elected, I will send a letter to all the European heads of state on the renegotiation of the treaty.
Hollande wants more stress on growth, less on cuts, and he's not afraid of government intervention. He would recommend using euro bonds to finance infrastructure projects and the introduction of a financial transaction tax.
Yeah, so look out for those unemployment figures in France a little later. We've got unemployment here in France edging back up towards 10%, so a difficult time for anybody who wants to be president right now. Let's leave the Eurozone alone and get a few more of the day's business stories for you now. Argentinian senators have approved the government's nationalisation of Repsol subsidiary YPF. Even opposition lawmakers endorsed the decision by President Cristina Fernandez to seize back Argentina's biggest oil firm. Argentina has attracted international condemnation for its latest nationalisation. Repsol is demanding around $10 billion in compensation and threatening to sue anyone who works with YPF in future.
Shareholders in General Electric have narrowly failed to take more control of the board. A proposal to allow investors to make more decisions about the US utility giant won 47.5% support. Well, the firm has lost nearly half its market value over the past few years. The move is the latest example of shareholder rebellions against firms following Citi's U-turn on a bonus for its chief executive.
And Mexican police have opened an inquiry into allegations that Walmart's subsidiary in the Central American country bribed government officials. It's alleged Walmex spent millions of dollars securing building contracts to continue the firm's expansion. Walmart has launched its own investigation back home, while a US shareholder is suing the supermarket chain for damages.
Now, this doesn't sound a very sporting story at all. Bandits and crooks, those are the words used by the European football's top executive, Michel Platini, to describe some Ukrainian hotel owners. UEFA's boss is incensed that businesses in Ukraine have been taking advantage of co-hosting the Euro 2012 to inflate accommodation prices. And it appears the strategy has backfired. 50,000 tickets remain unsold for the games in Ukraine. And the lack of interest is starting to bring prices back down, as Gulliver Cragg discovered when he visited the city of Donetsk.
The Donbass arena sits like a UFO amid a mine-pocked urban sprawl. Donetsk is no tourist town. Its hotels and restaurants have little experience in dealing with foreigners, but many set their expectations from Euro 2012 sky high. Reports of tenfold price increases led tour operators to offer day trips instead of overnight stays and deterred many fans. So the arena has launched an initiative to prove that Donetsk can welcome visitors without ripping them off.
The menu is already translated, and as far as I found out, they're gonna change menu a little bit for Euro just to make it shorter.
Venues that have English service and fair pricing will be listed on the arena's website. Businesses have rushed to sign up amid fears that the tournament might not bring the boom they'd hoped for.
It's not only our worry, it's worry for everyone, for hotels, for airline people, for everyone.
The John Hughes restaurant makes the grade, but some hotels are proving stubborn.
Some of the hoteliers still don't understand that prices are too high during Euro, so in case they won't bring it down, they may stay empty.
Even the four-star Shakhtar Plaza right next to the stadium still has vacancies during the tournament at what it feels is a reasonable €300.
The situation became different since February, when the organization which works with UEFA released some rooms which were previously booked.
At the lower end of the scale, increasing numbers of locals are renting out their apartments in the city centre and hoping that it's not too late to avoid the sight of empty seats at the Donbass Arena this June.
And Owen, that's the story about Ukraine and those inflated prices. Rather close to home for you, isn't it?
I do have to declare an interest here, Tom. I am going to that tournament following England, and I can tell you from a personal experience, it has been very, very difficult finding any kind of cheap accommodation. I think the problem with Ukraine is that they've only really got four-star hotels and then nothing much else, particularly in cities like Donetsk, where there's no real tourist infrastructure. But we were finding, for example, rooms in youth hostels for a dormitory bed that would normally cost around €9 a night for around €100 per night. Now, I suspect those prices now are starting to tumble. Nobody can fault the Ukrainians for the European economic crisis. That's partly why football fans are going to stay away from this tournament. But I think they shot themselves in the foot a little bit by ramping up prices in expectation, thinking that thousands of football fans would be there. And yet we've got 50,000 tickets unsold for Ukraine alone. Remember, this country is co-hosting this tournament with Poland. They've managed to sell their allocation of tickets. What is the problem with Ukraine compared to Poland?
Yeah, not the most beautiful story for the beautiful game, but thank you very much indeed, Owen Fairclough. That was a wrap of the business news. And thanks to you for watching. Do stay tuned, we've got more news coming up with Claire Pride in just a few moments.